Hey everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the stereotyping of minorities, specifically within U.S. culture. So this lesson is designed to be discussion based. So we're essentially just going to go through what we think, why we think it, and how can we stop society from creating these systems that allow stereotypes to exist. So, first, in order to understand stereotypes, we have to understand what they are. Al, can you read? Can you read the slide, please?
A stereotype is defined as a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image of an idea of a particular type of person or thing. Groups are often stereotyped on the basis of sex, gender identity, race, and ethnicity, nationality, age, social economic status, language, and so forth. Period.
God bless. So, does anyone want to simplify that? You? Over there in the green shirt?
Oh, me, okay. So it's basically a label that you can be targeted for.
Alright. So, now we're going to get into it. And for these questions, you can just shout things out. Yeah, that's...
Jazz hands.
Twink.
Bear. Otter.
Pedophilia.
Taylor Swift stan.
Khaki shorts.
Are we doing like neutral stereotypes or negative? Because I did two very negative ones.
Any.
Any
Okay.
stereotypes?
It's just a stereotype.
Flamboyant, obnoxious, too much.
Weak.
Weak, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, are y'all ready for the next one?
Bottom.
You say bottom? U-Haul.
That's a lesbian.
Flannels.
Gay women.
Oh! Yeah, you all. Flannels.
Manly.
Home
Oh,
Depot.
Doc Martens.
Y'all are doing the most.
Wait, I'm not done. Softball. Soccer. Let's see.
Lacrosse.
Lipstick lesbian. Chapstick lesbian. Butch. Butch Hartman.
I'm femme.
Let's see. What's another one?
Lots of tattoos.
Yes. Let's see. Piercings. Nose piercings. Into art.
Symptoms.
Septum piercings.
Not to add to the lesson.
Olin Black.
Okay.
Now we're just targeting.
Faker.
What's it called? What's it called? Oh my god.
Snowflake?
Oh, no. There's another thing where it's like a trender. Yeah. Snowflake. A phase.
Yeah. Phase is a lot.
Confused.
Tomboy. Yeah. Sad.
You would know the most about this.
Depressed.
Faker, hypochondriac, weak, not enough, pathetic, sad,
Dramatic.
dramatic.
Did this hit too far, too close to home?
This one hurts my feelings.
Also, I didn't establish this at the beginning, and I should have, but if it gets too much for anyone, feel free to step out. Okay. So, stereotypes in general, like they serve to outline this false perspective of a group of people that exist, and it's perfectly fine to identify with a stereotype. I know that at least in the LGBT community, we do it a lot. Literally on the phone 15 minutes ago, I heard, and I quote, "He doesn't look really gay." So we all do it. Okay. But we also have to realize that it's fine to not fit into those stereotypes too, and there are a lot of people that don't. So there was supposed to be a beach ball, and then I didn't have a beach ball, so we're gonna pretend like there's one in my hand, and we're gonna go around the room, and we're gonna talk about it. So, have stereotypes ever been used against you, and how did it feel?
Oh no, I dropped it! I got it. Okay. I'm too nervous here. I need to take it.
So, yes, definitely. I know one of the biggest things, and I actually noticed it when I first came here to FSU, and I made one of my first, fellow queer friends, but he happened to be cis. And when he found out that I was trans, 'cause he didn't know until later on, because he actually took my state ID out of my pocket and looked at it without my consent, and then started asking me really invasive questions. So then later that night, he was like, I don't mind that you're trans, right? And I said, well, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't be friends with you. And then he started talking about how I wasn't like other trans people. He said that I was cooler than other trans people, and then started talking about how he has this friend back at home who also happened to be a trans man, but he had issues with this friend because he happened to like wearing makeup and wearing feminine clothes. And I said, well, he's still a man who just happens to like feminine things. And that was when my friend realized that he was stereotyping trans men and the fact that every trans man has to be super masculine. And having that conversation with him was definitely frustrating, but when I made him realize why he was wrong and I saw the gears click, it was satisfying because I realized my power.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I definitely have had stereotypes used against me in various ways. Specifically as a disabled individual, I don't meet the stereotype of what disabled looks like. People are surprised if they see me with my mobility aid, if they see me with a cane or with a wheelchair. And a lot of times they think I am faking it just because of how my illness works and how I need different things on different days. And so I feel like the stereotype of what a disabled person looks like is used against me because I don't really match it. And people kind of just use that in order to make snap judgments about me and my character and be like, oh, you're faking it, or oh, you want some attention, or you don't really need that cane, please don't take my cane. But yeah, so that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, I feel like that's for every stereotype, that it's seen as you're wanting attention, or you're just faking it, or even it's like a phase in a way, which is wrong to think. Like, I've been stereotyped a lot, and I've had people put me into groups that I've not been a part of, if that makes sense. Where I've had people assume who I am, or I've had people who are like, oh, so since you're gay, then that's all you are. Like, I went from being the older sibling to being the gay one, and that's all I was. Having the stereotype of oh, so you do this and this and this. It's hard. It's aggravating to have someone judge you right away just because of how you look or how you act. I definitely don't fit into a binary that most people do, and it's frustrating when someone's like, oh, are you a man? Are you gay? And just fit me into a binary when I'm like, I'm just me. I'm just trying to be me and live my best life.
Absolutely. Okay. I'll answer this too, just because I'm feeling the vibe right now. And I've definitely also had stereotypes used against me as well. I know that I'm not the most masculine human being, being a trans man, and for some reason people like to have this idea of if you're a trans man, then you have to be more masculine than any other person on the face of the earth. You have to you have to literally buy Dove for men. And what about that one brand of it said men's bread?
What?
Yeah, that's a thing. Dave's Killer Bread.
Or the
Sold
men's
at Walmart.
wipes.
Or the men's wipes. Also sold
You
at
can
Walmart.
only use 3 in 1.
You can only use 3 in 1 shampoo. And you know, things such as that nature, and you have to talk a certain way, and it all goes back to like this this view that we have of toxic masculinity and like gender roles, that like trans men are stereotyped in that way. And you know, I've had people say that, oh, like you talk like this, or you move like this, you act like this, you walk like this. So are you really trans? And I'm like, sir?
Yeah, I've had,
Yes.
no, I've had the same thing too. Like, I've had people who, like, I would be like, oh, he's cute. And they're like, oh, so you're not a lesbian anymore. And I'm like, that's not how that works. But, like, for stereotypes, it's definitely like everybody is uniquely their own person, and you can't generally associate a whole group of people when everybody is uniquely a different person.
Absolutely.
So stereotypes, like, to me, and as like a general, is pretty stupid, because we couldn't generalize like a whole race and ethnicity or sexuality just based on an outline. Just because I would ever wear Doc Martens or flannel doesn't make me a lesbian. Okay. But you know what I mean. If I wasn't.
I feel attacked by everything that Al said. I would like to ask Al to leave the room.
Personally, I don't wear either of those, but you know what I mean. Like, it shouldn't be something that is not stereotype, but like generalized for a whole group of people.
Absolutely. And like, also within stereotypes, like when you get stereotyped, it depends on who's stereotyping you, what they're stereotyping you as. That makes all the difference as to how it makes you feel, right? Because like Keo could tell me I look like a fag. Hey, Miss Snowden, sorry. Like, Keo could tell me that, and I'd be like, thanks.
It's the Elton John shirt.
It's the Elton John shirt. That's what gives it away. And that's part of what stereotyping is. But within the group that you hold, sometimes that's accepted within a group. You know what I mean? But if I know that if a complete stranger who was straight, like heterosexual, cisgender, called me that, I would report it as a hate crime.
Yeah, because it's like, for instance, like that goes for any like marginalized group. Like if I have like a name like fag, dyke, and all that stuff, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Or like anything like that, having that in my community, like it's different than having someone who isn't in my community saying it to me, because outside of my community it's used as a derogatory term, but in my community it's kind of seen as like, well, I'm taking that derogatory term and laughing at it, you know, and I can laugh at it.
Reclamation.
Yeah, like I can laugh at it and you can laugh at it because we are marginalized.
Yeah.
However, that person who isn't in our group isn't marginalized and is trying to use it in a funny way, quotation marks, funny way, but you can't use it like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like me wearing the Elton John shirt. You're like, ha, that's gay.
Yeah.
But
Like if I said it, it's,
like if someone else said
yeah.
it, then I'd be like the puppet on Victoria's. You don't know what I got. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, glad we had this conversation. Okay, so now we're gonna go into like, so stereotypes exist, and they're basically ingrained in every single person that like walks the earth. But why?
well, I'm talking a lot, I guess.
You good?
That's good. We got 20 minutes. We
Oh,
have
okay.
to.
Okay, I'm gonna talk for a little bit and then I'm gonna pass it to you. I think it's honestly like media in general. Like when I turn on like the TV and like they're making fun of like, I don't know, like not making fun or like putting stereotypes. Like for instance, I'd watch like Family Matters and you see like the gay man, and it's like stereotypical, like oh, you know, like I don't know, like a stereotype. You know, so like I grew up watching that, you know, so I'm like, oh, all gay men are like that, or all girls are like that. you know, and then you have like the stereotype of a tomboy, and you don't realize everybody's your own unique person because you grew up in a family that doesn't talk about it, and no one really talks about, I guess, that everybody's their own uniquely individual. It's kind of like, oh, all women freaking suck, man, or, you know, I'm not trying to come out boomers, but, you know, like, it's just, I don't know, like, the media, I would say, like, media, and then, like, what we grow up around, you know, and it's socially accepted, which is BS, in my opinion, that we have stereotypes for marginalized groups when it's not, like, true for, like, half of, like, the stuff. Like, I'm completely different than you, and we're part of, like, the same group, you know? And same, like, we were all part of, like, a group, you know, but I'm way freaking different from all of you, and you're way different from me, so, like, where's the truth? Where is the truth?
Okay, so the thing about stereotypes we kind of have to, the things about stereotypes we kind of have to acknowledge is the fact that there's kind of like positive, negative, and neutral stereotypes, and they can all be harmful in their own ways despite that.
We go.
But
It can be over time, I don't care.
yeah, but so all of them like kind of originate from different places, like negative ones, neutral ones, positive ones. But with all of them, I think it's just kind of hard to represent the nuance of a complicated individual person. And like human beings, if they can find a shortcut, they will use a shortcut. Like we're kind of lazy by nature. Like no offense to humans, but like low key.
I'm offended.
Oh my god. But and I think like it's just kind of easier to represent people in media or like in anything that we consume, like just resort back to a simpler version and to stereotype people. It's not healthy and it's not a positive thing to do, but I think it is something that is done just to like cut corners and to like just make things more simpler for people. And so we kind of have to like step away from like simplicity in favor of what's moral.
Yeah, because people like to categorize things.
Yeah.
It's just within.
Human beings are organized.
It's just within how people function in everyday society, and they don't like to look further than surface level.
Yeah, and I
And
think
that's where the issue comes in.
yeah, I think it's also like the like ignorance when it comes to it. Like, well, I don't really want to like. Not like I don't want to. It's just like, oh, that I don't need to. I don't need to look at like, I don't know, like Muslim women, you know, and like look deeper into that other than like they wear a hijab, which like that's not all it's about, you know, or like other marginalized groups, you know, like it's like, oh, you know, you're disabled so you're sad, or like, oh, you're gay so you're sad, so like.
You're a minority, you be sad.
Yeah, practically, but it's like, I don't know, like, I would say like a form of ignorance when it comes to it, like, oh, so I'm kind of just going to sum up a group and that's it, you know? So I feel like that's kind of like a way to attack people in a way, like, I could like sum up a group and be like, well, you all are just like this, so.
Alright. Has everyone said their thoughts?
Y'all pretty much said what I was going to say.
Oh, heck yeah.
So how can stereotypes be dangerous to the people they're placed on?
I think we just said it. I think we did. We've been saying it.
Well, it just like
I think there are good and bad ones.
yeah, and the bad ones like you can say like, you know, for like African Americans, like, oh, black men are dangerous. Oh, they're more likely to do this and they're more likely to do that, and then you're put in that situation where those stereotypes can like endanger their lives. If a police officer produces a stereotype of all black men are dangerous, that police officer will shoot that black man for no reason.
Which actually leads into the next one.
Oh,
Oh.
In what ways have you seen actions based on racial stereotypes?
definitely stuff like that, or like even like on a more minor scale, like you know, like getting onto a group of black girls but not the white girls and saying like, oh, y'all are too loud, y'all are too much, even if it's the same volume level, you know what I mean? It can just be like, it can be minor scale and it can be macro scale.
Yeah. Like main scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know something I've personally seen and read about multiple times, because people have this stereotype that black women are very loud and dramatic. When black women seek out medical attention, and they don't even seek out medical attention that often because they know this is going to happen, but there have been numerous events of black women went to the emergency room because they have a very clear medical problem. Like, one big story that I read about was a black woman who had a very intense cough, and she had gone to this specific emergency room multiple times for I think 4 or 5 months, and every single time she went, they assumed that she was just there to get drugs, and they would just give her some Advil and send her home. And then one of the times that she went, the person she spoke to happened to also be a black woman, and the person that she spoke to reached out to the doctor, who was a white man, and the doctor was like, oh, she's always here, she's just here for drugs. And the, I think it was the receptionist, who was the other black lady, was like, well, are you just not seeing her because she's black? Like, why are you assuming this? And then, of course, the white doctor was like, are you calling me racist? And the receptionist was like, I didn't call you racist. You're the one who called that just now about yourself. So they actually did perform some tests on the patient, and they found out that her condition had gotten so bad because the ER had refused to treat it, that every time that she coughed, and it was a really bad cough, she was actually having a small heart attack.
Oh, it's awful.
It was really, really bad, yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely like I don't know, we're seeing this like a lot more in the past, I don't know, like I would say like 4 or 5 years. Like we've seen like marginalized groups be like attacked a lot for race, like especially like not trying to get political, but like as a fact, like we've seen like Hispanic groups like be attacked ruthlessly for like, oh well, go back to your own country, or like, you know, like, and calling them like awful things, like, or it's just awful, like seeing like stuff based on stereotypes of like, oh well, you're an immigrant, so all you want to do is steal my job and take my money and all this stuff, you know, or you're part of this, I don't know, it's just like,
Yeah. And like these stereotypes perpetuate dangerous falsehoods
exactly.
that, when put into the minds of people in power who make decisions based on these groups, and then their rights are then stripped.
Yeah. It's hard when you have people in office who are, everybody's a human being, so everybody's gonna have their own stereotypes, so it's hard to have that in office.
Absolutely. So, for the record, Ariana said, and I quote, all of them. All the systems.
Yeah.
Most specifically, the systems that are led by people who are not stereotyped as much, I feel. Or people who prescribe to those stereotypes and then make policy decisions based on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like policy and lawmaking is such a huge system that will like keep these stereotypes cemented, and then we have like bigoted, biased Cheetos in office talking about like, you know, like talking shit about all the racial minorities and every minority in general. Then, you know, that's our leader, that's our like, and that affects all the lower level lawmakers and politicians and blah, 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 and that's what's in the mass media, and that affects our country, and that affects the country's temperament towards minorities in general.
Yeah, and that goes for like any nation. Like having a leader in office that is gonna, I wouldn't say like bash, but I would say like, yeah, like I would say like dehumanize a whole group based on stereotypes is immoral. Like it's highly immoral. You have to think about the consequences in your actions, especially when you're a leader. No matter if you're a teacher or an office or whatever you're in, when you're controlling a group of people, not controlling, but in charge of a group of people, you have to think about your actions, or else they're going to lead to consequences.
Okay, so now that we've talked about what this is and why it matters, what are we going to do about it?
Unelect people.
Vote them
I'm
out.
joking.
No.
No, you're
Vote them out.
completely right.
Vote them out.
Completely
Impeachment
valid.
trials, get them out of there. Like
It's not just impeachment. It's like even like the lower levels. We have people
yeah.
like in
Vote them out.
yeah, like we have people all over. We have people who don't like we have a Texas lawmaker. I think he's a governor who believes in non-vaccination.
I grew up with vaccines. I got them for college.
Oh wow.
We could take all the non-vaxxers and put them somewhere else.
Oh my god. No. But like I would say like finding the problems where they're at, for instance like unelecting or removing them from that system, whether it's in a school, in office, or no, stop, or wherever they are, and we're gonna have to rework the system for it, and we're gonna have to think hard and long when it comes to electing someone. We can't elect them on bias. We can't elect them on popularity. We have to elect them on
Merit.
their stance and, you know, their like what they're gonna do instead of their popularity, because this is all a popularity contest when it comes to government. But it's not just government. It's even like our teaching systems. We have people who are teaching who systematically keep repeating, you know. We have kids who hear it from teachers who are like, oh, so that's what's happening, so I'm gonna believe that. Like we have stuff in like our history books that just isn't right. We had the Christopher Columbus stuff until people were like, actually he raped and pillaged a lot of people, guys. You know, but we still celebrate Christopher Columbus Day.
Do you mean Indigenous Peoples Day?
Exactly. That's what it's called now.
Correct.
So it's taking apart different systems and looking at our problems. It's going to take a long time. It's not going to take the next 5, 10, 15, even 30 years, but we'll get it done. I feel like we can. I'm an optimistic person.
Does anyone have anything else they want to say?
Sorry, I ranted.
Okay. So, how can we, at this base level, demolish stereotypes?
What do you mean at the face level?
So like as individuals?
At the individual level.
Okay,
Oh.
so definitely education is such an important thing. Or like if you see something, say something. If you see people perpetuating stereotypes, or you notice yourself, because we all have like biases. But if you see someone perpetuating it, including yourself, like check them lightly, but do check them and educate them. Like it's very much something we all have to like work on.
I know one thing that I have actually done it works really well and it's really fun is when someone makes a joke revolving around a stereotype, sit there and say, I don't get it. And then try to get them to explain it. And as they explain it, they start digging themselves a hole and realizing, well, hopefully if they have enough brain cells, they start realizing what the problem is. In a few events, the person might just say, oh, you're just one of those snowflakes. But generally, they're going to realize the problem and they're going to say, oh,
But
you
that
got me.
But that language is demeaning a whole, not demeaning, I would say like ignoring a whole thing. You know,
Okay.
it's kind of like being like, okay, snowflake, or like, okay, like, okay, whatever you say, millennial, or okay, boomer. Like, you're demeaning a whole group, and I know, like, it can seem easier to say it, but we can't just demean someone's point of view just because of, like, you don't believe in that. You have to listen to people. I have people I'm friends with that I don't believe their beliefs, but, like, we're cool, and I like hearing their side because it gives me knowledge into, like, their point of view. And that's what really matters. You have to be educated, like you said. You have to. And if you're not, then, like, you're gonna stay in your bubble, and you're gonna stay arrogant, and you're gonna perpetuate these stereotypes.
I know, like, a really big thing, at least I'm bringing the beach ball back over here.
Don't drop it.
The
You
beach
dropped
ball.
it!
Oh!
The beach ball still exists.
Yes.
I've been tossing it, man.
Okay. I know that sometimes the most basic thing that I can do to demolish stereotypes is exist. Like, literally,
Yeah. Me too. I feel that.
like, when it comes to, like, the stereotype of trans men, I don't fit it. Like, at least not in a basic sense. And, you know, a lot of people, like, they'll walk around and they'll be like, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's this thing where if you have representation that's outside of the stereotype, it sort of breaks that stereotype wide open. It's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the case.
Yeah.
for people, because there are people that exist outside of those stereotypes, and there are people that exist inside of those stereotypes, and it makes you realize that a group of people, not all the same. It's a wide spectrum. I know that a really big part of, I don't know, bisexual culture is that they have to be like artists or something, like art hoes. Y'all know what I'm talking about, and don't think I don't know that you do. And
Is this how you felt?
that's also not the case. I just think it's interesting.
No.
Also, another big stereotype of bisexual people is that they're non-monogamous, like all of them.
Same thing with polyamorous people.
Mhm.
Well, polyamorous people are
Polyamorous people
monogamous,
are non-monogamous.
I thought they could be monogamous with their partners.
but they're polyamorous.
Polyamorous
Means many partners.
is
I mean, you can be like,
That's what I was like. I thought you could be monogamous with your multiple partners, though. Like, I mean, like, for instance, like you, not married, but like I would say, like,
you can be like loyal and dedicated to them. That doesn't make you monogamous. Monogamous just means you have one partner.
oh, that's stupid.
Monogamous isn't like monogamous doesn't have anything to do with like length or commitment. It just means one. Polyamorous just means many.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not polyamorous, but that's stupid.
You
Yeah.
can be committed to your polyamorous relationships and have them for life.
So getting
Okay.
back on topic, just being there and showing up in a space where you have people who might be ignorant, does more than you think it does.
No, I definitely get that. Like, I have like the same thing. Like, I wouldn't really generalize myself as a person. People make assumptions about me. They're like, oh, so you're a lesbian, and I'm like, oh, so you're trans. I'm like, I mean, I'm Al, and I'm always gonna be me. So don't worry about that, you know.
So,
And
there's nobody like you.
oh, you know it, man.
So
Oh God.
this is
Be
actually
Rooney.
this is actually from
You know I'm dyslexic.
this is actually from a Stanford article. I'm not going to ask you to read it. I'm going to read it for you. This was from an article from Stanford, and essentially what do okay.
You should go.
Essentially, it was talking about the steps of how to demolish stereotypes. And so the first step that they pointed out was that you have to find out about actual people and practices. You know, do your research, be in those spaces and experience that culture. Because if you don't, then if you have no experiences of a certain person's culture, then you have only the idealized version that you made for yourself, which most of the time includes stereotypical notions. And then the second step was to consider both the structural and cultural mechanisms by which gender divisions and inequalities are often sustained. This was mainly in terms of gender, but I feel like it works for a wide array. And then the third step was to seek to expose the mismatches between those norms and reveal what is actually there versus what ignorant people think there is. Yeah. So, we've talked about this a little bit already, but
We talked about everything.
But have you seen examples of people demolishing stereotypes around you? I know you said that a really big thing was asking people what they meant when they made a joke that was largely contingent on stereotypes.
Big word.
Well, I can share a personal example that actually happened. once.
Absolutely.
So there's one time that I was at work, and one of my coworkers, of course, got there a little earlier than me because she tends to start her shift 30 or 40 minutes before I do. And there was construction going on for an apartment that is now finished, and people are living there. And she, when I was talking to her, we were talking about the construction and how we were curious about how long it might take, and she mentioned the workers, and she was like, yeah, I was walking from the parking lot to my car and I saw the Mexicans working on the construction site. And both my friend and I turned and we were like, well, how do you know they're Mexican? And she said, well, they were playing Mexican music. And my friend and I were just very confused and said, well, are you sure they're Mexican just because they were playing Mexican music? And she caught on. She realized what she was saying. She was like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. And she was like, she apologized. And she was like, I'm not trying to be discriminatory. And she realized what she was saying. And obviously, because she's a very chill person, but that was a really interesting conversation to have. And I was thankful that she actually realized what the problem was when we kept asking her what she meant by that.
Yeah, like mild racism or like homophobia or any like marginalized group is like very common, especially when it's just like a side comment and you don't really hear it until like it's been said. Yeah, so it's definitely something like when you do pick up on it, I do like talking about it, like you said, like, oh, what do you mean, or like I've heard like I've had examples where like I've had people be like they're just like so gay, like I don't get why they have to like flaunt it, and I'm like, well, it's who they are, everybody has like their way of expressing themselves. You have your way of expressing yourselves. Like we have even like stereotypes for like people who are like emo or gothic or like disco girl, like like we have stereotypes for that, and everybody has their level of like how they express themselves, and that goes for anything,
Yeah.
and I definitely think like talking about it,
Yeah. Having a conversation
is like the most important thing, especially when it comes to demolishing stereotypes or anything, really.
Alright.
Oh, gross! What is that?
I told him not to put that in there. I told him.
Oh my God.
You should fail him.
No, I didn't.
Miss Snowden,
So-
give him an F.
No, this was just a fun fact that I found on the internet while I was doing this research.
Oh, this meme?
Did you get my funny?
We're gonna put it together. It's gonna be fun. Someone called my fucking phone. Anywho.
Are you gonna put that in there?
Yes, I did. Okay. So there are
Maybe an
two parts of
interesting
this video.
project.
So this is just a fun fact that I wanted to put in because I thought it was funny. And essentially, being gay was seen as a disability, which means that it was on a list of disabilities. And essentially, to protest that, people called into work saying that they were too gay to come in, and therefore, given that it was labeled as a disability,
God, I wish it was still
the
a thing.
people, their employers had to let
Paid
them.
time off.
And so
Oh,
that's
hey, I'm too gay. I can't come in.
yeah.
I'm just feeling so homosexual today.
I
Sorry, can't make it.
So the law was changed.
I just watched Queer Eye. Oh my god.
I watched Birdcage last night. Can't do it today. Sorry.
Okay. So final thoughts. What did we learn? How can we help to demolish these stereotypes about the groups that you belong to, or even the groups that you don't?
Pass the ball, pass the ball. You hit it right in the face!
I'm already disabled. Goddamn. Sorry. Anyway, what we learned about the stereotypes, they're whack. So definitely they don't apply towards people. I think that's a consensus we've come towards. Like individual people are more complex than stereotypes will ever be able to do. We need to dismantle them. We talked about various ways to dismantle them. We also we've learned that Al loves to talk about stereotypes.
We also love Al.
We do love Al.
We learned that-
That's its own separate thought.
We learned that Al loves to talk. Period.
I'm sorry!
No, you're an ideal
We
student.
love to see it.
The awkward pauses
We
as a
love to
teacher are the worst. Miss Snowden can confirm there's awkward pauses in our classes all the times.
Miss Snowden?
Snowden.
I'm just. I was such a fan, but catch me next year. You're gonna love me.
Okay.
But also, yeah, exactly what you said. Like, I would say, definitely talking is always like a good thing to like incorporate into like our ways, especially now. Because like, if you can't have an open conversation, like it's just we're gonna lead to a world where it's demolished. Like that's like facts. I'm sorry.
Gee.
Like we have to have an open discussion, even if like we don't like it. Like I have open discussions with people who I can't understand their point of views, but if I don't have that open discussion, then I won't understand their point of views, and we won't be able to have a conversation. And I'm friends with people who I don't share their point of views, but
I'm happy I can call them my friends, you know? And we learn more about each other. And I think that's a great thing to have. And when it comes to the stereotypes, like, we should demolish a lot of them, yeah. Because every person is their own individual. And a lot of them are negative. I can't see where a stereotype has helped me other than when I'm in my marginalized group with other people who have been stereotyped. But that's just my thoughts on it. But our whole conversation we've had for the past 20, 30 minutes, I would say,
Emily's gonna hate to see it.
we
I wonder why her name is up because she's just gonna be speaking free. She'll be here like Miss Snowden, Miss Snowden, Miss Snowden, Miss Snowden. She'll be like, why are they talking about me so much towards the end?
Alright. Anyone else have anything that they want to say? Anything to put into the universe that's gonna be caught on video? Yes.
You're a good teacher, Mr. Rooney.
Thanks.
I think you're an adequate teacher.
Hey!
Actually, no, I lied.
With the rest of my,
And that's
teaching
called
email.
a failing grade. Anyway, these are my wonderful students.
Hi, I'm the one that talked.
Yeah, we love to see it.